Well, welcome back to the 21st Annual Wild and Scenic Film Festival. We're here in Nevada City, Grass Valley in the northern Sierra Nevadas, and we're here at Communal Cafe on Broad Street, Nevada City for another awesome session, Media Lounge. Today, it's been an epic morning, and we continue to meet and greet with tons of filmmakers and important people, activists and enthusiasts like myself. I'm Kimberly Ewing. I'm your host this morning, and it's been a pleasure. We are actually with someone pretty fantastic. I'm not sure, she comes from the story of a province in Chile.
Yes.
This is Jocelyn Tabancay Duffy.
Yep.
And her film, I'm going to say it in Spanish, Hasta, última gota, but it's Until the Last Drop. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Good. Tell me a little bit about the highlight of your film.
Yeah, so I co-produced this film with Ben Dorico, and we were both really inspired by Chile's movement that was happening last year to rewrite the Constitution. And we really focused in on water rights because in Chile, essentially, with the old Constitution, which was written in 1980 by the dictatorship, basically says water's private, just like, you buy it just like land. And so if you don't have money, you don't necessarily aren't guaranteed water. And so what's happening in the province just about 3 hours north of Santiago, called Petorca, they're running out of water really fast because businesses, big farms, mostly grow avocados, they're using it all, and homes don't have water, schools shut down for months at a time because they don't have water. And we were documenting that process of people fighting for their water rights back.
Yeah, it was shocking to see in the scene from your film where the children in the school, yeah, they had to be really, really conscientious of their water usage, and then they had a whole wall of bottled water, and that was the only way they could drink. That's a really moving choice that you did. Tell me a little bit more about why you chose this film, or why was this important to you?
Well, I have to give Ben a lot of credit for focusing in on schools. That was one of the big things that really inspired him to zone in on this region, because it's that dire, when the most vulnerable and the ones that need to be protected and cared for and grow aren't being able to because they're being denied a natural resource, a human right. And so this was one of multiple schools that was going through similar things. I'm sorry, you asked why?
Yeah, it was a really creative choice that you brought in, like you said, the most vulnerable kids, where you're seeing it's going across the villages and across the communities. I just thought it was a really powerful choice as the creator or director, someone who was involved in the film. It showed the magnitude of this problem.
Yeah, really, no one in the region is untouched by this issue. There's one of the protest statements that they make is no es sequía, es saqueo, which translates to it's not the drought, it's theft. And so it has that play on words in Spanish, but that's essentially, the mega drought that has been happening for over a decade there. They have a very similar climate to California.
Right.
So they would be experiencing that either way, but then when you realize how much water, a single avocado takes so much water to grow versus a person, all the water that is left is essentially being left to farm, and really big farms. It's not just most of the food that's grown there doesn't stay in the country. A lot of that food gets exported. Avocado is very popular in North America, but most of those go to Europe and Asia. And so it's really the situation where if businesses are allowed to dictate the terms, which is essentially what the current Constitution has, this is where it goes.
Yeah, and what I read or what I understood from the film is tell us a little bit about how you were trying to through legislature and law, change it and the Constitution, and then what happened.
Yeah, so this is a kind of a long story that I'll try to do in just a minute or so, but in 2019 there were huge, massive protests in Chile, and what came out of it was an agreement to attempt to rewrite the Constitution. So over the next few years, there's a long drafting process. that was incredibly democratic. Over 150 people were elected to be part of this redrafting process. We documented the representative in Petorca, who, one of her main issues, because that's the one that, the region regionally needs, is rewriting the water code. And so they drafted a beautiful draft, including a lot of natural resource management was included. And I think even just the draft itself is incredibly revolutionary, because it's going from how do we move from this very private sector thing into, the human right to water, because Chile is not the only place that struggles with something like that.
Right.
And we were there in March when that draft got approved. And unfortunately, when September came around of 2022, the Constitution wasn't ratified. They voted no. And so the law of the land is still the dictatorship era Constitution. Right now, it's being redrafted vaguely. It's a different process. There's less representatives, but everyday people are back at it again.
You got to keep trying. What do you think happened?
With the
why did it not get ratified?
I think water and natural resource in general wasn't like the most contentious point. Mm-hmm. A lot of people were, Chile historically has been a pretty conservative country, but also very polar. And I think that the pandemic, changed the country a whole lot, and there was just a lot of change and disruption. I think people were really nervous about change, and changing a constitution is one of the biggest things you could probably do in a country.
Right.
And so there's a lot of hesitation, and then the draft was incredibly progressive, so there would have been a huge overhaul. And so there was a lot of women's rights and indigenous rights in particular that were pretty contentious. And so when it came down to like new or more of the same, 62% of the country said more of the same. Mm-hmm. But there's been a strong, in Congress and by the president, there's been a lot of support to draft a new one. So I think it's sort of like, let's see what part 2 looks like.
Right, back to the drawing board.
Yeah, back to the drawing board and make it so that this is a constitution that people want to approve.
This was a project in your grad school project? Okay, tell us how you chose. I mean, were there options at this point as that person? Were you able to choose and this is what you chose?
Yeah, so Ben and I both went to Berkeley Graduate School of Journalism, and we graduated in 2022. It's a really great school, and we were able to really pick who we collaborated with. So, our pairing was fantastic, and then we could kind of make a film not about anything, but the world was sort of our was wide open to us, and both of us really wanted to explore water rights around the world. Omicron was happening at the time, so we had a much bigger, more ambitious, if you can believe it, like project, but we were able to document both the water crisis here in California, which we have a separate piece, and then we went to Chile, and that was our big international piece. And so it was a really beautiful experience being able to explore the similar and different ways that natural resources either protected or exploited, because we go through a lot of exploitation here in California. And for me, it's definitely been life-changing. Like, I'm an environmental journalist now, so I cover water and so many other different, like, renewable energy and other resources. So
you're entrenched in it.
Yeah, I'm deep in.
I love it. It's so admirable, and thank you. I'm a fan.
Thank you.
What's going on for you next? What's happening? What's in your pipeline for projects or other things you're working on?
Yeah, so I've been lucky enough since I graduated in May, helped produce 4 pieces for The Guardian, and one of them was a California water story about the drought and how tons of wells are going dry in California. Over 1 million people in California don't have access to clean and safe water. So the issue of water is definitely not just in other countries. And now I'm moving into a lot more stories along the Gulf Coast. So a lot of people don't know, but that's where most of the petrochemicals and fossil fuels are sucked out of the ground in the U.S., and the impact on frontline communities is really devastating because they leach chemicals into the air and into the water, and so the highest cancer rates are really between Baton Rouge and New Orleans. But there's a lot of really exciting things because we're in this era supposedly of transitioning to renewables, so this is also a place where we can maybe see some of those industries start closing down and, great areas like solar and wind instead. So that's
Right.
what I'm documenting, and also being really inspired by all the change makers on the ground pushing back and saying like, hey, no, I live here. Like, this isn't just, we're not just fighting for land, we're fighting for our rights and our livelihood. So I continue to be inspired every day by all the great people I get to document.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Jocelyn. It's been a pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much. And we'll continue the film. Your film is playing again this morning, as far as I know. So get to it. Well, thank you guys for joining us for our 21st Wild and Scenic Film Festival Media Lounge, and we will continue. Thank you for being with us.